Unfortunately, in the playground business, you're not going to be quite as fortunate to have an easy working environment. With this, we'll take one solid piece and form them around the post, but bear in mind that in a typical playground setting, more than likely I'm not able to stand right here because these posts are supporting a deck. So that's going to be a lot of on your knees, crawling around. So what I typically like to do with my installations is I like to knock out my larger areas first. The areas that I know that I can get the most out of one piece of turf and not have to cut it up so much. It's easy to get overwhelmed when working with playgrounds with how many seams, how many cuts and everything that you'll have. It's important to always be conscious of that because the last thing that you want to do is find out that you forgot about a seam, that you didn't repair it or seam it together properly, and then you start infilling. Your guys are out there, they're working the brooms, they're working the shandawas, and all of a sudden they hit a seam that's under a slide and the turf flips up. Then you're like, oh, we forgot. Then you now have sand brought into the equation that could get on the adhesive, contaminate that, and then make it much more difficult to glue and support. So what I'll do is after I get my large pieces out, to try and keep me from getting so overwhelmed, I will try to get a piece to where I can just get past the point of where I'm needing to cut. So let's say, you have so many obstacles on playgrounds that provide different things that you have to cut around. You could have kind of a ropes course where each one of those ropes goes in, and it could be just one part of the playground, but it could have 15 different areas that actually go into the base that you're going to have to go around. So instead of trying to take a really big piece of turf and try to fit it in through each and every one of those obstacles, if I can take something small and just get myself, say, a foot or two past that point and start my next piece off of that seam, then that's how I found the easiest and best way to kind of go about working around, so many obstacles. When you're working on playgrounds, you kind of want to step back and take a look at the playground as an overall to figure out what's not only going to be the easiest way to work in there, but like this, for instance, we decided that we would have shorter seams by working it center out. That way, with shorter seams, they're shorter cuts. You're minimizing the length of the cuts, which therefore will minimize the amount of glue that's needed. And like I was speaking yesterday about the more cuts, it's kind of like the more weakness that you're putting in the turf because you're taking it from one piece into several pieces. So with that being said, we decided that our easiest route was going to be work to the outside rather than having seams the full length of this area to form around these posts. Now sometimes you don't have that ability. This could be a deck sitting here and you don't have the ability to get the turf in that way and you need to form it in piece by piece. So, they don't really live by a set standard of how to install. Just install the easiest way for you to make sure that you can get it installed properly and securely and safely for the future. So I'll start from the center of the post. I'll pull the turf back and make my first cut where it's going to be onto the surface. That way it's going to lay flat. You don't want it to pucker up onto the post or onto whatever structure it is that you're cutting around. So when I'm making this cut, I'm also trying to keep my cut as straight and as clean as possible. Again, only using the corner of my knife to reduce any any cutting of the fibers underneath. Once I've made that first cut, I'll then fold the turf over and begin working it around my structure so that it will lay down flat. So pay attention to what you're on. Pay attention to any wrinkles that could be behind you, because if you make this cut and let's say there's a wrinkle behind you, when you adjust for that wrinkle that's behind you, it could throw the cut off and then you don't have a formed cut around your structure. So make sure that it's laid down flat, smooth, and then I like to start cutting one side at a time so I can get this piece pulled over, laid down flat, and it will help me for my next piece to form up to what I just cut. So you have to kind of take your time with working around these structures. This is going to be somewhat of a weak area, being that we don't nail in playgrounds. So a form fit is really key to security. You don't want to have large gaps or anything that the kids can get their hands up underneath. And you just want to kind of work the turf, constantly moving, making small cuts around the structure to make sure you've got a nice tight form fit. Once that's done, I can flip this piece over, which will now create my seam that the next piece will be going over to. So with having to do that, in order for me to fit this piece over, I've got to go to my next structure and make that cut the same way I did that, so this piece can fold in and form, and then I can cut around the other side. So now that you've made your cut around your post, everything seems to be laying down flat. You shouldn't need to do any kind of trimming to the seam that you just made. If you do, you may want to check to see if anything's off, if there's a wrinkle over here or something that's holding it up. But your seam should form fairly nicely to the cut that you just made. You can pull them together if it's off somewhat to adjust, but then your seam should be ready for glue and seam tape at that point. I definitely wouldn't recommend seaming and adhering anything until that piece is completely cut in and put down. Some pieces that are held up, like when you've got this piece here that's still folded back, it could be pulling any of your seams that you've made off of where they should be. So it's important to kind of get everything all cut in, making sure that everything is formed, all the seams are good, and that the turf is all laid down flat like it should be.